I have some friends in dry country Alberta. That's kind of over by the Saskatchewan border, not all the way to the south, who a couple of decades ago bought the land and buildings that had been homesteaded by some people named Naismith. The Naismiths, there's some connection maybe even to the origin of basketball there. Anyway, when John and Andrew Goodbrand bought the place, they found decades of meticulous records of business dealings and of politics and lots of correspondence about Christian beliefs and practices, just tons of papers. Anyway, John and Andrew sorted all these papers, and then they donated them to the Glenbow Museum in Calgary, because this was kind of historic material from the beginning of the 20th century. They told me the whole story about a dozen years ago, but nearly 3 years ago, it'll be 3 years ago in September, I was in downtown Calgary with just 1 hour to kill, but I was suddenly right across the street from the Glenbow Museum. So I went in, and the receptionist told me that I was too late, that all the Glenbow historical archives had been shipped off to the University of Calgary that week. Now, this is disappointing to me, or was, because for years I'd wanted to read one specific original letter that John had told me about. So I asked the woman at the desk if she'd give me the phone number of the archivists. The man on the other end of the phone said, "Oh no, we haven't sent that yet. It's up here. I'll come down to the lobby and get you." I guess it's sort of secure, the archives of Alberta. And you can spend some time looking for this. For a needle in a haystack. because the apparently, and this man told me, the Naismith papers were a row of boxes of letters, a meter and a half wide, a double row of those, so 10 feet of letters and etc. And I thought, this is not possible. But some smart dry country rancher farmers had sorted everything, and we had a computer. So I took a guess at actually, I asked for 5 boxes that looked like they might be the right dates for what I was looking for, because I had a little knowledge in the back of my mind. I thought it might happen because I was looking for Mr. Naismith's mention of a man named Sidney Burge. I knew that this letter talked about a man named Sidney Burge, so I thought, let's see what this is. The second letter in the second box had Sid's name on it. And so I was kind of thrilled by that. Now, one more bit of background before I read from that letter. The Naismiths were part of that little Christian tribe that's sometimes called the Exclusive Plymouth Brethren. The exclusives had a very limited circle of other Christians they could fellowship with, people who believed exactly as they did. Anyway, David Naismith in this letter is writing to some safe, exclusive brethren folks in Saskatchewan, talking about the very open brethren who gathered in Berry Creek, Alberta, a little tiny settlement on the prairies. The open brethren were more open, slightly more open, to people with different understanding of scripture and beliefs. He's writing about an incident with Mr. Burge, one of the leaders amongst that group at Berry Creek. And last little note, just because it's fun to say, my dad was a little 8-year-old at Berry Creek Gospel Hall when this note was written on December 2, 1927. Mr. Burge was an important influence in his life. Okay, this is what Mr. Naismith, David Naismith, writes. He says there was a company of OB, that means open brethren, 10 miles west, and I frequently met them on the way to the coal mine 20 miles west. There's no trees in that part of the prairie, so you have to have coal to survive the winter. So you can imagine that there are people going there with wagons to get coal and people returning with wagons full of coal, right? And so that's what he's referring to. He says, Mr. Sidney Burge, who had traveled with a gospel wagon through our towns in Western Ontario, was one of them. I met him on the road, and I intended to tell him just where he got off. I said, we are not on the same side of the fence. Mr. Naismith was intending to say, you're wrong about some things, very definitely. And he said, I hope that will not hinder our love for one another, which I always thought that was a great line when someone's just told you what a dumb person you are. That took some of the wind out of my sails, but it was some years before the old prejudice died out. And I feel certain that not only the first division amongst those gathered out to the Lord's name, not only the first division amongst Christians, but all subsequent divisions have been erroneous and avoidable. I will give you one you knew well, old Mrs. Pollock, now with the Lord, no doubt. I sought to get her clear on the grant question that people were fighting about, and all I could get out of the dear old sister was that it was a want of the element, meaning love. There wasn't enough of the element, love. I could see that her heart was big enough for both parties at the Grey meeting, and it was only the weight of a friendship that had made her take sides with those with us. A neat old letter, hey? I just was so excited when I found that letter that I'd heard about. I couldn't find the return letter in the box, but I checked with Rancher John a couple of years ago, and he told me that the fellow Mr. Naismith was writing to wrote back to him and disfellowshipped him. He said, if you're going to start loving those open brethren, we're having nothing more to do with you. It's a long story, but I'm hoping that those two phrases will stick in your brain. I hope our disagreements won't hinder our love for one another. And it was a want of the element, meaning love. Because of course there's a want of the element. Of course it's what we need to be doing. Love as actions, love as a verb, not just a noun.